Forget the headlines for a second. We're going to dive into a story that almost nobody is talking about. How America's closest ally quietly became the hidden hand shaping its entire economic survival. Look, this isn't just about boring trade deals. This is about fighter jets, electric cars, and a really high-stakes power play that's unfolding right under our noses.
And it all really kicked off on one specific date, September 2025. Now, on the surface, it was just another month, right? But behind the scenes, the US government was making a move so unprecedented, it would completely redefine its relationship with Canada forever.
So what did they do? Well, for the first time in history, the US government did something it had never, ever done before. It didn't negotiate a new deal. It didn't sign a treaty. No, it bought its way directly into another country's core industry with cold, hard cash.
And here's what went down. The U.S. Department of Energy took a 5% stake in Lithium Americas and a 10% stake in Trilogy Metals, both Canadian mining companies. And let's be crystal clear, these were not just investments, they were lifelines. This was a desperate move to lock down the raw materials for everything from a Tesla battery to an F-35 fighter jet.
And this is what makes it so wild. Just a few months earlier, President Trump had basically dismissed Canada with this line. But the actions of his own government, they told a completely different story. A story of a critical, undeniable, and maybe even uncomfortable dependency.
So, how deep does this dependency actually go? I mean, really? Let's get into the numbers that are fueling not just America's military, but its entire green energy future.
All right, let's start with a number that should probably keep some folks at the Pentagon up at night. Every single F-35 fighter jet, the absolute backbone of the U.S. Air Force, needs 920 pounds of rare earth elements. And where do most of them come from? Yep, the U.S. has to import them.
And it's not just about defense. I mean, think about the lights in your own home. There are 94 nuclear reactors in the U.S., a huge chunk of the nation's power grid, and they all depend on a steady supply of uranium that comes almost entirely from Canada.
And look, this isn't just about one or two things. We're talking about the entire shopping list for modern warfare. Cobalt for jet engines, niobium for aerospace alloys, gallium for advanced radar. There's a reason the U.S. officially considers Canada part of its own defense industrial base, because without this stuff, the whole machine just grinds to a halt.
And for some of these minerals, Canada isn't just a supplier, it's the supplier. Take niobium. Okay, sure, Brazil produces most of it, but this one mine in Quebec, the Niobec mine, it's the only commercial producer in all of North America, period. If that mine stops, the entire continental supply chain for this critical aerospace metal just breaks.
So here's the bottom line. For 12 of these absolutely critical minerals, the United States produces zero. Nothing. It is 100% reliant on imports. 100%. And Washington is basically betting the entire house that a huge portion of that secure supply is going to come from its northern neighbor. The scale of this is just staggering.
So this forces us to ask a pretty tough question. Is this kind of extreme reliance on a single neighbor a massive strategic risk, or is it just a smart, efficient alliance? I really want to know what you think, so let me know down in the comments.
Okay, so the dependency is obviously real, but that still doesn't explain the timing. Why the sudden, desperate investment in September 2025? What was the spark that lit the fire and created this mad dash against the clock?
You really have to look at the timeline to get what's going on. In March, the U.S. slams Canada with 25% auto tariffs. The immediate result? 4,500 workers at the Stellantis plant in Windsor are sent home, and the supply chain just freezes. Then, fast forward to September and boom, Washington makes its move, buying into the very source of the minerals it needs. This wasn't some abstract policy debate. It was an emergency response ahead of some really high-stakes talks at the APEC summit.
So, what was the other driver? Well, a full-blown economic war with China. And the main battlefield right now is the electric vehicle market. In 2025, China's BYD officially blew past Tesla in global sales. As you can see here, China now owns over half the market. Washington is in a desperate race to build a non-Chinese supply chain before this war is completely lost.
But here's the real kicker. It's not just about digging the minerals out of the ground. It's about refining them. Think of it like crude oil. You can't put crude in your car. You need a refinery to turn it into gasoline. It's the exact same idea here. And China has an absolute stranglehold on that process. They control over 70% of all cobalt and lithium refining. And, get this, a staggering 95% of graphite,
All of a sudden, securing a supply chain with Canada wasn't just good economics, it became a matter of national security.
Which brings us to the twist in the story. Because in this high-stakes game, Canada isn't just some passive resource pit. No, it holds a hidden weapon, and it's pointed directly at the heart of the U.S. economy.
And that leverage isn't just some theory. I mean, here's the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, in October 2025, laying it out in the plainest terms possible. He straight up threatened to cut off the flow of minerals if the trade war got any worse, a move that would absolutely cripple key sectors of the U.S. economy.
So, if Canada has this trump card, why haven't they played it? Well, it's complicated. First, it's basically mutual assured destruction. Canada's own $38 billion mining sector would collapse. Second, it's a China trap. If they cut off the U.S., Washington is forced to run right into Beijing's arms. And finally, there's this simple, almost absurd problem. Canada's richest mineral deposits, this area they call the Ring of Fire, still don't even have roads to get to them.
So I'll ask you, if you were in the hot seat, making the decisions in Ottawa, what would you do? Would you use that leverage to try and get concessions right now, or would you keep it in your back pocket as a powerful threat? Drop your strategy in the comments.
All of this, everything we've talked about, is building towards a single point in time, the 2026 review of the USMCA, the big North American Free Trade Agreement. And experts see three possible paths forward, and the choice that's made will define the continent's economy for a generation.
So, here are the three paths. Scenario 1 is what they call Fortress North America. This is where the US and Canada go all in together, co-investing in everything from mining to refining. That's the win-win that breaks China's grip. Then you've got Scenario 2, the slow fracture. This is where both countries get nervous and start to diversify away from each other. Costs go up, and China quietly wins. And then there's Scenario 3, full weaponization. We're talking tariffs, export bans, and all-out trade war where basically everybody loses.
And if you think that's an exaggeration, just look at this number. If Canada were to restrict just one single mineral, gallium, it could vaporize an estimated $600 billion from the U.S. economy. That one number shows you just how fragile this entire system really is.
It really all boils down to a very simple, very powerful dynamic that defines the entire continent's economic future. America has the incredible technology and the massive consumer market, but Canada has the rocks. It has the raw materials that make all of it possible.
The dynamic is just so clear. Together, they can compete with anyone in the world. But divided, they risk handing the 21st century over to their chief rival. So the final question is pretty simple. Will this alliance actually hold under all this pressure? Or is China going to just outmaneuver them both? Drop your prediction in the comments, and hey, tell me whose economic strategy we should break down next.